What's up, guys? Just wanted to give you guys the video that I promised you I would give you with the downscan, um, how to use electronics tutorial and what I'm looking at. Right here, I wanted to show you guys that I have my line of waypoints right there to the left of the boat. And it's just a line basically marking all the structure that's on this high spot that I have marked. So I'm just going to kind of go through and point. You'll watch my boat how it's going to um, the direction that I take and which angle that I'm gonna approach this. So you'll see where I'm sitting. Right now it looks like the boat's pointed forwards, but I'm actually casting backwards. So all that ruckus on the right hand side right there, that's all bait. There's a couple things that I'm gonna point out that is gonna be really helpful to you guys on what to look for. Now this particular unit, I'm using a lowrance, and they have a new um, update that's called Fish Reveal. So I used to use downscan and maps and 2D sonar, but now my 2D sonar overlaps my downscan. So it's much easier to use it this way. I can use two screens instead of three. If you see that on the bottom right there, that's a bass right there, clear as day. Above it is a bunch of bait fish. Looks like little bluegill with a couple other game fish that are close by. So anytime you see that hard return next to structure on the bottom, those most of the time are bass. Okay, you're going to see a couple of them together. Now, this particular area that I was fishing, it was stacked. I mean, I caught 12 of them on it a couple days ago, and then on this particular day, I caught a couple off of the shallow part of it, which would be waypoint number 338. You can see it's the closest, but basically that's how I mark it, and then this is how I fish it with my boat. You can see that I'm sitting out at the deepest point of it, casting towards the shallowest point, and then dragging it back. And I'll hit each and every one of these. Same thing here. It's some bluegill or bait fish on the bottom. I have a really good image later on of some bluegill that you guys can see exactly what they look for. But to see the bait fish up at the top too, and 2 to 4. And I also have my setting on high clarity, so or high surface clutter, so that you're not going to get any kind of surface clutter off of that screen. So you can see right now I'm fishing 339, waypoint 339. So this is exactly how I set it up to where I'm going to angle towards what I'm casting at. And I'm sitting in 16 foot at the deepest point. Some of the biggest ones have come off of waypoint 339, which is right at 16 foot. And towards the end of this, I'm going to drive right over top of it so you guys can see exactly what it looks like. So these blue returns, those are not directly under the boat. The ones that are directly under the boat will be yellow and orange. That's your harder return, okay? So keep that in mind. There's a lot of good information in this video that's going to show you exactly what I'm fishing and exactly what it looks like. Now, the closer I get to this waypoint, you'll start to see how much bait is actually on the waypoint and how many bass are actually down there, okay? So you want to see them tight to the bottom too. You want to see them like on the bottom. Those are the ones that are going to be a lot easier to catch. Now you can see the further I go out, the further that drops. Okay, now this is still the same exact area. And now I'm on the shallowest point of it. So now you can see that it's 10 foot at the shallowest point. Some of the bites have come in 10 foot. I caught a 5-pounder in the 10 foot last week, and then this week they were all on 339. So that's what I mean by you can use the same exact areas, except they're going to be shallower or deeper. Okay, so let's take a look now. I'm going to drive right over top of it so you guys can see it. So let's see. Here we go. See that rock right there on the bottom, right at the right of the screen, and then you got that hard yellow return. Those are bass right on the bottom, right next to those rocks. I just pointed at it. You're going to see what this stuff actually looks like when I come closer to it. The water temperature is 76 degrees, so it's starting to cool down. I mean, these fish aren't going to be here long before fall, and then they're going to start pushing shallow. this was tough to do with the camera on the screen too. So you gotta keep in mind that some of that the shakiness from it is from my um the boat shaking with the camera trying to stay still over top of it. So you can see another fish right there on the bottom with that red return. All right, so now I'm getting closer to it. Now this right here, you can start to see it. I'm not exactly over top of it, but once I get over top of it, you'll start to see. You can see how there's that hard rock bottom. See scattered rock, little fish, some bluegill, those blue specks. You'll see bluegill because they'll be really, really tight together. Like I said, I'll show you later on what that exactly looks like. Now that I'm coming over close to this waypoint, you'll be able to see a lot better. Just hang tight here a minute. Now you can see the second one is in 12 foot. So the first group was in 10 foot. The second group is in 12 foot. And then that last group is in 16 foot. The waypoint 350 where the rock is, that's where I was sitting my boat when I was cast into 339. So you can always make a waypoint of where to sit your boat with another icon. That way you know the good angle to cast to the actual target. Okay. See, I mean, you can see how many fish are in this area. I mean, this place is just alive. Anytime that you get those streaks, long streaks like that too, it's just that the fish are moving. Okay, there's a bass clear as day on the bottom right there. 14, 14 foot right there. It looks like three of them together. And then here's where the structure I was fishing. I'm coming across it. Now you can see exactly what I was fishing. See all those bait fish up above it? And now look, see the change in bottom right there? They love right next to that deeper water. So the top of that structure right there is in 13 foot, and then it drops off to 16 pretty quick with another piece of structure right next to it. Okay, so they could either be on that first one to the left or they could be on that one to the right. You have to fish it all. That's why I sit parallel with it and cast across, so I'm dragging across all of that. Okay, and then you want to make multiple casts of the same stuff because a lot of the times you won't know exactly where they're sitting. But yep, that's exactly what you want to see right there. You see all those chunks, and then now that there's another fish right there on the bottom, hugged tight to that structure right there in 15 foot. Now that long yellow line, that's the fish moving. Okay, so when there's a long line like that, that just means that the fish is moving. There's not a steady arch, and there's some more bait fish right there, hugged tight to the bottom. Those are probably some sort of shad, gizzard shad, or something like that. But when you see the bluegill in the next clip, I'll show you exactly what they look like. But that's what you want to see. That's exactly what you want to see when you're fishing a spot, and just do the same thing that I did and mark every piece of structure that's on that high spot. And then, once you get a bite on one of them, then you can make another marker of where your boat was sitting. That way you know exactly which cast you made. So then you can line it up again easily the next time instead of trying to figure out where you were sitting and etc. But I mean, if you don't have electronics, the best way to do it would be to line your boat up with something on the bank where you can keep going back to it. Now that's a good fish return right there in number 12 foot right there. That red and blue one, he's a little bit further over from the boat than it looks because it's got a lot of blue in it, but that's another fish right there. Um, Now you can see these little rocks on the bottom. That's that hard bottom. That's the only change on this area besides that piece of structure that makes this different, is that there's rock bottom all throughout there. Okay. You can see that fish right there, clear as day, right next to a rock. That's the same fish I came over just a little while ago. And then you start to get into the structure again. So you can see what kind of stuff is on this bottom here. I mean, this is the juice. This is exactly what you want to find. Anytime you any lake in the country, anytime you see anything like this is what you want to fish, especially since it's closer to deep water. I mean, you got these fish can move shallow, they can move deep. They can go as shallow or deep as they want. There's a flat right there in front of the boat where there's, the blue meets the dark blue meets the light blue. That's a flat right there. Okay. All right, so here's the second spot. Now this one is a lot smaller than the first one. So this is more of like a piece of structure versus an area, okay? So you can see right now I'm in 10. The structure is out there in about 15, 16. But you see um, the coincidence between this one, or the similarities between this one and the last one, is you're getting that rock bottom. Okay, see how there's little humps off the bottom? That's rock. Um, and then once we get a little bit closer to that waypoint, I'll show you exactly what it is that I'm fishing, and it looks pretty identical to the last one. Okay, all this stuff's going to look similar because there's a reason for it. All right, and I'm not sure that this is what you guys wanted to see, but this will help you at least to identify and the difference with downscan versus 2D sonar is if you use downscan without fish reveal, you're gonna these will all show up as dots. They're not going to show up as any color. Okay, so you just have to pay closer attention. Now we're starting to get into some of the structure. There's a little stump on the bottom right there. Little bit of bait fish off to the side of it. It's probably further to the left, closer to that structure since it's blue. Blue is not a very hard return, so it means it's off to one side or the other. Okay. And now we're going to get closer to that structure. And when we get close to it, you'll see exactly why those fish use it. You're going to start seeing bait fish. And those fish, especially in the late summer, they want to be around that bait. I mean, any time of the year, but especially late summer. Okay, so you're starting to see a little bit of chunk on the bottom here, and then the rest is just flat. You don't want any of that flat shit. You just, you want the structure, the juice, the high spots, anything different about that bottom that's not the same as the rest of it. Okay, so you see we're starting to get out deeper now. I'm drifting out just a little bit closer to that structure. And as soon as I get close to that structure, now you're starting to see bait. Okay, there's a couple pieces of bait there. There's going to be a wad of them here in a second. And the bait that's around this particular piece of structure is bluegill. I'll tell you how I know that as soon as I see it. So here you go. This is exactly what I was targeting right here. See, all right, that's a 3 foot tall almost rock. Okay. And then you got some little chunk next to it. That's the kind of stuff that a big bass likes to get on, where he can sit on that spot by himself, not be bothered with, and just eat anything that he wants to in sight. Okay, now watch. When I get a little bit past this, you're going to see how much bait is actually around it. So here's a little more chunk bottom, a little bit of structure on it. Getting a little chunkier here. You'll feel all this stuff too. When you're dragging through this, you're going to feel it. I mean, you'll know you're on the spot. Now there's a little clump of bluegill right there. You can see them dots and how tight together they are. Here it comes. Here comes the big group of them. See all those dots? See how tight together they are? Those are bluegill. And they're hanging out right next to that structure. So that's exactly why those fish sit on that structure. That reason right there, just so they can open their mouth and just choke on one of them little bastards. All right, so there's all your bait. And now we're going to come across another group of them here shortly. Now that yellow line right there is a smaller fish. And the reason why you can tell that it's a smaller fish is see how it's broken up like that? When it's not a straight line or a straight arc and it's broken up, that's a smaller fish kind of scooting off the bottom. And this thing will pick up anything. I mean, I can see my bait clear as day on it. So it's going to pick up every little movement. There's a couple other little bluegill on the bottom. See those 3 dots right next to each other? That yellow line, that little fish moving was probably a bigger sized bluegill or um, some kind of small game fish, maybe even a small bass, but it didn't look like it to me. And the only way to tell the difference is by doing it. You know what I mean? Like I've spent thousands of hours staring at this graph and have caught what's directly underneath of me. So that's how you get to learn your graph. It's not going to happen really, really fast. And that's the main reason I use lowrance because I'm comfortable with it. I've used them for years. I know every in and out of it, and it's just easy for me to use. I know exactly what I'm looking at. So there's more bait fish there on the bottom. A couple other little yellow returns there on the bottom. This area this day did not have any fish on it that I caught. But you can, obviously you can tell this is where a fish lives. So here we go. I'm getting a little bit closer to it again, and then you're going to start to see the bottom change again. All right, there you go. There's all your wad of bluegill again. Another one up in the left corner, left side of the down scan, and now on the bottom there's another group of big bait fish too. So that's a telltale sign of bluegill right there. What you want to see. That's a ton of bluegill hanging out on the bottom, up in 8 foot, on 10 foot. They're all over the place. So that's exactly what you want to see when you're looking for big bass around bluegill. Okay. So that was just a short clip. I just wanted to show you. Those bluegill are hanging right off that drop too. Right where that 10-foot contour meets that 12-foot contour, that little slope right there, they were sitting right at the bottom of that. So here we go again. Another group of bluegill. See, now you're starting to see the difference. See, dot, 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 dot. And they're all bunched up. Those are always bluegill, okay? If you see one that looks more like a Christmas tree, that's shaped like a Christmas tree, those are crappie. So here you go again. Bunch of bluegill. Dots everywhere. Now, like I said, that's not directly under the boat because it's coming as a blue return. If I was directly over top of them, that would be a red or a yellow return. So that's a little bit to the right or left of us. Okay, see, you're starting to see a little bit of rock bottom here too. This is another section. See how I got them lined up? 228 is where I was sitting the boat, 270 and 185 is where I was catching them off of. So that 270 is in 12 foot and 185 is in 10 foot. So you're starting to see that bottom again here. It's starting to get a little chunkier. Yep, a little bit of chunks, some little bait fish down there. But for the most part, it's flat until you get to that. So that's how you tell the difference between what kind of bottom you want and what kind you don't. Because if it's just flat and there's no change to it, you don't want that bottom. Okay, you want that bottom that's hard, that has that bright white return at the very bottom. That's telling you that it's hard bottom. You can see that fish, that yellow fish right there, tucked all the way down up in them rocks. That's how low those bass normally get when they're, ready to eat. They're on that bottom. I've caught them this week with mud on their bottom. That's how low to the ground they were. Okay, so here you go. You're starting to get a little bit of rock there too. I'm going to turn the boat just to show you guys what I'm fishing here. Okay, here you go. You're starting to get into some of the chunkiness of it now. It gets pretty chunky though. Not a whole lot of bluegill on this area today, this particular day, but you can start to see a couple little pieces of bait fish down there. Not enough to keep a fish there. And then I'll turn the boat and then you'll start to see that bottom again. There's a couple really good ones coming up. They're starting to get a little bit of blue return dots from the bluegill again. A little bit of chunky rock bottom right there. So that was marking that bottom, and my boat was sitting at 228. So just use a different icon when you're marking where your boat was sitting when you caught that fish. That way you know which icon is where my boat's sitting and which icon is the structure. Okay, so just change it. It's pretty easy to do. So as I come up now, I'm going to come over 185. This is where I normally caught most of the fish that I was catching off of this spot. Okay, now I'm going to turn and show you what it looks like. So now we're up a little bit shallower. We're starting to get some of that chunky bottom. Now I'm going to turn the front of the boat right over top of it so you can see exactly what it's looking at, what it looks like. You'll see that high spot come up off with that giant giant piece of structure, whatever it is down there. It's some kind of wood or rock or something, but okay, so I'm going across it right now. Now you see how high up off the bottom that comes? That's what you want to look for, guys. Flat, 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 and then something changes and comes up off the bottom. It doesn't matter what it is. Um, that's what you want to, that's exactly what you want to look for when you're fishing for bass, okay? See, there's a couple little bluegill next to it, but this is, on this particular day, I wouldn't even stop and fish this. There's not enough bait there. Okay, so now this area right here, now this is a long rock pile that goes from number 155 all the way to 277. And so there's one long rock pile, then a gap where it drops into nothing, and then another rock pile, and then it drops into nothing, and another rock pile. And you can see how chunky this spot is. Okay, and if you look all the way to my left, do you see how that contour line makes a point right there? That's what you call an underwater point. Okay, so you guys have been asking me what's a underwater point? How do you know? That's how you know, on the contour on your graph. And also, if you don't have a graph and you drive across it, you can see that your unit comes up really shallow and then will drop back down. Okay, so all this is it's an amazing rock pile. Okay, there's a lot of it. It's right near a channel. It's close access to a flat, and there's deep and shallow water right next to it. So you'll see why in a minute why this spot is so good. But so you can see a couple little bait fish right there to the left of the down scan. Now you're starting to get into that chunky rock bottom. Okay, and there's a couple like high spots on it. I'm not sure if there's stumps or if there's some kind of wood or something, but you can tell how different this bottom is than anything else. Now this is like key right here. This spot right here, you can pretty much catch fish off of it all year, whether it's at the shallow point of it or the deep point of it. But you can see how chunky this is. Okay. And I mean, you can fish this with a crankbait. You can fish it with a drop shot. You can fish it with a jig, whatever you want. Just make sure that whatever bait you're throwing is on the bottom. You're keeping contact with them rocks and stuff. Okay. Now, they usually sit on the very end of this at 180 or 277. Now there's all the bluegill right there on the screen because that's the closest to deep water and it's also closest to that underwater point. Okay. So as we move in a little bit closer to the structure, you'll start to, I mean, this has a ton of bluegill on it, but this is the same as the first one. Like it's right next to, um, really deep water. Okay. So you remember me saying that in the past, and I'll keep saying it until it beats in. Now I'm still in the same spot, but there's the bluegill off the very, very end of it. Okay. So you could even fish it out to that far. I don't have that marked, but I do drag it out that far. I'll go out to 16, 18, right at the corner of that contour, right in front of my boat. Um, but there's a game fish right there, a little bass on the bottom, in the yellow following that school of bait fish. That's like a prime example of what they look like when they're following bluegill. Okay. And they're going to stay close to that structure, but they will wander a little bit, if that bluegill leaves. Okay. So I'll turn the boat around and then you'll start to see it again. And this is, I mean, this is a prime example right here. So this is normally where my boat's at right now. That's where I would sit the cast to what I just saw. Okay. So, well, that's the end of it, guys. And I hope you guys learned something. And if you need to see anything else or want to see anything particular about electronics, just let me know. And I'll get it up as soon as I can. All right, guys. See you.